This is my project 5. I'll reload it just to prove that it works. So in the top left corner, we have a world map, and we can kind of select countries by clicking and dragging, and they'll appear in the other two country displays. We can get rid of a color by clicking on one of those countries. In the top right, we can choose a variable. Let's choose gross national income. Then we can see where these appear in the other plots. We can choose another variable, maybe life expectancy. There's no brushing in the bottom left, but this is, again, a parallel coordinates plot. And in the bottom right, we have a principal component analysis plot. And this arrow here corresponds to the variable we've selected is in our histogram. So here this is the direction of life expectancy, or rather the projection of life expectancy. Here we see that military expenditure is basically the second principal component. And the brushing technique that we have for the PCA plot is we can select data by highlighting them in a square, and that will show up in the other two kind of country plots. If I want to restart everything, I can just select a new variable. Let's just go to Gianna. It doesn't really matter. So my first data story is going to be about kind of what types of countries there are in the world according to my PCA plot. So I want to point out a few things. First off, we have that current health expenditure and military expenditure, both as a percent of GDP, both point positively in this direction of the second principal component. But what's interesting is you can see in the parallel coordinates display that the current health expenditure and life expectancy aren't super highly correlated. So in some sense, current health expenditure indicates a little bit of government wastefulness, which is kind of military expenditure also ties in with government waste. And so that kind of indicates to me if a country has high current health expenditure and military expenditure, that country is a little bit more authoritarian, maybe a little bit more dictatorial. And so that's kind of what the second principal component indicates to me. The other variables, as we can see, all point generally in the same direction as the first principal component, except employment in agriculture, which points the exact opposite direction. So if we want to get a sense of, interestingly, literacy rate also points away from the second principal component, so kind of the government's not spending enough on education. If we want to get a sense of what type of countries we have, first we can select these countries here. This is actually corresponding to one of my two k-means clusters from Project 4. And we can see this is kind of the world that's not very developed as it is. So there's a lot of countries in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia where we hear about poverty in a lot of these countries, and also Papua New Guinea, for example. If we want to select kind of the developing world, we can move a little bit higher on the first principal component. Seems like this is a pretty good dividing line here. Oh, well, I want to have this be my dividing line. And then we can get a sense of the developing world. So the big two countries, India and China, a lot of Latin America and South America, and most of the rest of Africa that wasn't selected before. Some of the countries have no data. Also, I had to remove Ukraine because it was such a massive military outlier that it completely changed the structure of my PCA plot. And that makes sense because they're currently at war. Now, when we're looking at the developed world, we can kind of divide these countries into two camps. One, the countries that have lower military spending, lower health expenditure, and higher literacy. And so these are kind of countries where it's just nice to live there. They're going to be more liberal, and they're going to be very rich. And so we see like Canada, a lot of Western Europe, with the exception of Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, also Japan. These are all countries where at least my personal bias is that they're nice places to live. And then if you want to look at the richer countries with higher health expenditure, higher military expenditure, and lower literacy, then we get a sense of more of the countries that may have a higher inequality rate. So we're seeing some of the large oil producing countries like Oman and Saudi Arabia, and also some more authoritarian countries like Russia and, unfortunately, the United States at this point, honestly, and Great Britain as well, the United Kingdom. So that's my first data story. We can kind of take a look at, using the PCA plot, which countries are maybe nice to live in or not so nice to live in. My second, I'm just going to clear everything by clicking this. My second data story is kind of looking at, using the map display, we can kind of drag through a bunch of countries that are close together and see how they stack up. So I'm going to kind of select countries in the Middle East, North Africa region, because these are countries, a lot of these are OPEC countries like Algeria, Libya, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, etc. And a lot of the other countries are countries at war. So like if we look at Israel and the West Bank and Gaza, and we see when we look at the PCA plot, again, these are some of the countries with higher military expenditure, either because there's an association between oil production and military, because you're going to have a lot of inequality because some people are benefiting a lot from the oil while a lot of the population is not benefiting. So you need the military to keep the populace in control. And countries that are at war, like Israel and West Bank and Gaza, are also going to have higher military expenditure. And so we can kind of see that they don't really form a cluster, but you can see how they're kind of, the geographic region does kind of group nicely together in that sense. If we want to look at another region, we can look at like Western Europe, kind of culturally similar countries that all are located in this lower right area. And so in that way, the region will tell you a lot about what type of country it is. So that is my project. Thank you for watching.